Story 1. Overfishing and bycatch have caused a huge loss of species and fish populations. Some species have been so overfished that there are not enough mature adults left. Young fish that are not yet of reproductive age are being caught, and in the next few years we will see well-known fish species go extinct. Thousands of sharks are killed as bycatch every day. Larger species take so long to reach reproductive maturity that their populations cannot recover. Our oceans are about to look very different. Story 2. Antibiotic resistance is already causing deaths from previously treatable infections. It is only going to get worse. Story 3. Let us just do some light Reddit scrolling before bed. Story 4. Aquifers are being drained at completely unsustainable levels. The ones under Kansas and Atlanta are in dire straits. Many others are being contaminated by agricultural chemicals. It is going to be very bad by the year 2050. If you buy real estate, obtain mineral and water rights to the property. Story 5. Erosion of the best arable land due to overuse of fertilizers and deep plowing has created dust bowls in China, Ukraine, and Russia. Grain prices are likely to rise, and grain is a component of most food supplies. Locally, the steamship Richard Montgomery is a hazard. Someday it may explode, putting increasing numbers of people at risk. There are also volcanic hazards from Mount Etna and the Campi Flegrei in Italy. Story 6. I am not sure how large a time bomb this is, but many people are expecting inheritances that will never materialize. As people live much longer, middle-class estates are often depleted by long-term care costs. If your parents cannot afford nursing home care, Medicaid may cover it only after their assets are spent, leaving little or nothing to inherit. If you are young, do not count on inheriting their house. Story 7. The Great Salt Lake is on track to be completely dried up in about 5 years. Story 8. Histoplasmosis. Many people have compared this to The Last of Us. Histoplasmosis is a fungal infection that causes growths resembling tumors, usually in the lungs, but sometimes in the sinuses. It is caused by a fungal spore found in poultry feed that the bird ingests. The spore becomes active in the bird droppings. When droppings become airborne during cleaning and transportation, the spores can be inhaled by humans. Many people require removal of part of a lung or removal of an entire lung because of this disease. When the infection is in the sinuses, it can begin pressing on the brain as the sinuses fill. The illness is difficult to diagnose and often mimics recurrent infections such as sinusitis or bronchitis. Diagnosis usually requires magnetic resonance imaging and trials of different medications. In most cases, people are not diagnosed until the growths are large and have already caused permanent damage. The infection can cause flu-like symptoms, memory loss and brain fog, expectoration of growths and blood when coughing or blowing the nose, fatigue and weakness. If a growth presses on the brain, loss of sensation and loss of use of limbs can occur. Brain fog and memory loss can be permanent. I live in Arkansas, where there are 2 major chicken companies and about half a dozen other poultry plants. I used to live 2 blocks from one of the busiest slaughter plants in the United States. Previously, only people with immune problems or other serious illnesses were getting this infection. Now perfectly healthy people are dying in our area. We used to breathe about 1,000 spores a day, but air quality is no longer reported. Companies are opening more plants to meet demand for chicken, and they have worked aggressively to undermine air quality protections so they avoid consequences for making people sick. There are many people here with missing lungs or missing lobes, and everyone treats it as if it is normal. Many people are sick and do not even know it. Some die without ever learning what made them sick. This can be easily prevented by buying quality feed for the birds. Yes, it is that simple. I almost died so they could save a few dollars on feed. Story 9. Many people overlook biodiversity during discussions. However, this neglect may one day come at a hefty cost. Story 10. To give this question a very literal answer, I think everyone should watch what is happening in Ukraine regarding drones and ask what we will be seeing on the news in the coming decades. Story 11. The Kessler effect. For decades, we have been placing satellites and other space debris into low Earth orbit, LEO, without a coherent plan for disposal or overall traffic management. At some point, Scientists believe the density of debris in low Earth orbit will reach a critical level and trigger a cascading chain reaction known as Kessler syndrome or the Kessler effect. Under the right circumstances, two pieces of debris, such as old satellites, can collide and fragment, producing more debris that then collides with other nearby objects and breaks them apart in turn. The result is a growing field of high-energy debris in low Earth orbit that can destroy satellites we rely on for much of our technology. A dramatized version of this scenario is the plot of the film Gravity, but it is a real concern that scientists have considered since the 1970s. If the Kessler effect is severe, low Earth orbit could become so hazardous that satellite operations and spacecraft launches could be effectively impossible for generations, or at minimum satellite services could become far more expensive and degraded for a long time. No one knows precisely where the critical density threshold lies or how bad the situation could become. Donald J. Kessler, the scientist at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA), who first described the problem in the 1970s, concluded that the debris environment was already unstable by 2009. Demand for satellite services is only increasing, so we must hope that advances in collision avoidance and debris mitigation technologies outpace the growth in orbital debris. Story 12. The medical system is collapsing and proper care is disappearing. It is tipping over, and soon the wealthy will receive services while the rest will not. Story 13. I think people have an attitude of, well, coronavirus disease 2019 just happened, so we're not due for another one for a century. We've spent the last century building the perfect environment for pandemics. Story 14. You should review safety inspection ratings for dams and bridges, especially along the East Coast. It should not take long before you become concerned. Story 15. Education is eroding, at least in the United States. Without substantial fact-checking from reliable sources, misinformation spreads at an ever-increasing rate on social media. People take it as gospel because education systems in the United States are so focused on metrics and teaching to standardized tests. Critical thinking and problem-solving are being boiled out of the curriculum. Funding is held hostage by those who test well. Tests are being created by the highest bidder. Students are not taught to challenge their own thinking or the work of others. Instead, they see a societal norm in which anyone can spout anything and find people who will agree. Story 16. The Cascadia subduction zone has historically produced strong earthquakes every few hundred years. The Pacific Northwest is not built for earthquakes, and even a magnitude 7 would be a disaster, never mind a magnitude 8 or 9. One of these events could wipe out large sections of the region and cause massive casualties. Story 17. You have been scrolling for a while. Take a breath, close your eyes, and appreciate life for a moment. Story 18. Permafrost is melting. Good luck trying to greenwash our way out of that. Story 19. The dangers of microplastics from plastic containers, food wrappers, bottles, and other sources. Story 20. The cost of housing, at least in the United States, is affecting middle-class and low-income people. It is becoming unsustainable in my area and probably many other parts of the country. Towns that used to be known as blue-collar are charging rents that were once seen only in wealthier communities. I do not know how people are expected to pay these rents or mortgages. We may reach the point where 8 people must live in a 1-bedroom apartment to afford housing. At some point, this becomes unsustainable. Story 21. Just enjoy Earth while you still can. The monkey ruins everything with his greed and thinks he is smart, but he is not. Story 22. Societal collapse, specifically the erosion of social security. I am writing from the United Kingdom. Back in the 1970s, the United Kingdom was one of the most equal societies in the West. Many people lived in social or council housing. In the 1980s, much of the social housing stock was sold off through the right-to-buy policy, and for many people this ended housing security. By the end of the 20th century, short-term and zero-hours contracts reduced employment security. The introduction of tuition fees for higher education weakened the link between higher education and stable employment. This describes the long-term, deliberate breakdown of the social contract and the stripping away of social security across Western countries. Young people in their 20s are not naive. They are realizing they receive very little benefit from the system and are being set up to fail. The current social and political model in places such as the United Kingdom and the United States is not sustainable. There is a straightforward choice between social breakdown and civil unrest, totalitarianism, or complete socioeconomic collapse. Simple question. The year is 2030. How will you live? What will you live on? What about your children if you have them? Story 23. Our current economic system is a time bomb by design. Housing shortages, inflation, homelessness, war, unsustainable levels of debt, erosion of social security, climate change, and loss of biodiversity threaten systemic collapse. It is only a matter of time before the system implodes, when companies cannot increase profits and people begin rioting for food and water. Story 24. If you develop dementia and need to live in a nursing home, be prepared to pay $15,000 per month out of pocket. If you cannot afford that, you will have to go on Medicaid, which requires that you have spent virtually all your own assets on your care. Gifts you gave in the 5 years before applying can trigger a penalty, even if you and your family did not anticipate this. The 5-year look-back did not exist until 2006. After you die, the state may recover costs from your estate, including your house. Most families cannot suddenly provide 24-hour care for someone with dementia, especially because people with dementia can become aggressive or violent. Many families who had been passing down money and homes for generations will no longer receive inheritances. Story 25. After reading this thread, I point broadly at everything. Story 26. The impact of the pandemic on a generation of young children has been severe. The younger they are, the worse it is. Now that children are back at school, many are acting very disruptively, and some parents have given up. Having them at home during COVID harmed many children, and many parents struggled even before the pandemic. There is another problem, a behavioral one. No one wants to work in special education anymore, because it used to be 1 or 2 students with behavioral needs and the rest were developmental. Now it is the opposite. Schools are creating individualized education programs for children whose behavior stems from a lack of discipline at home, often to remove them from the general classroom and provide extra resources so other students are not held back. We need to prepare and change how we provide special education. We must develop behavioral programs that help children learn appropriate social and self-management skills so they can function in the world. Even well-behaved children have fewer life skills than previous generations, and the system sometimes tries to accommodate them enough to move them through. I worry about job prospects for this generation. Source. My wife heads the special education department at a local school. Story 27. The United States Social Security system faces financial pressure. People are living longer than when the program was first introduced, and payroll tax revenue collected under the Federal Insurance Contributions Act is insufficient to cover all benefit payments. In addition, the federal government does not set aside individuals' contributions but uses the funds for current expenditures. As a result, the program faces difficult choices. End the program, which would harm people who have paid into it for their entire lives, or increase the federal deficit to continue payments, which could worsen inflation. Story 28. When all the hedge funds and other investors who invested in real estate decide, whether by choice or legal mandate, to divest from that market, there will be a real estate glut followed almost immediately by another foreclosure crisis. Nothing was fixed after 2008, and the banks went straight to work building a new economic doomsday device. Story 29. Maybe a warehouse somewhere is a big vinegar and baking soda volcano just waiting to go off. Story 30. Kessler syndrome occurs when there is so much space debris orbiting a planet that it becomes dangerous to send a spacecraft through it. Could happen in our lifetime. Story 31. The ever-encroaching gray ceiling is appearing in jobs and careers worldwide. An entire generation is set to begin leaving the workforce within the next 5 to 10 years, yet many will continue to hold skilled positions because they are unwilling or unable to retire. With millennials locked out of those roles, Generation Z is largely unwilling to accept the idea that college is the only real career choice we were taught. As a result, there will be a substantial gap in suitable replacements when positions open, and many industries, including manufacturing and raw material sectors, will be crippled by a lack of qualified workers. It should be an interesting decade. Story 32. Religious lunatics are becoming frightened. They will either fade away relatively peacefully or become more violent than they already are. Story 33. Mine is about ticking time bombs. My hometown experienced heavy bombing at the end of World War II. Thousands of unexploded bombs are buried beneath houses, schools, and parks. They penetrated the ground without detonating. Nobody knows how many there are or where they are. Every few weeks one is unearthed at a construction site. Some are small 250-kilogram bombs, some are massive 1,000-kilogram bombs. The only thing keeping those hidden bombs from detonating is an almost 80-year-old priming mechanism consisting of a potentially cracked glass vial and decomposing cellulose. If the glass vial breaks, the chemicals inside dissolve the cellulose. If the cellulose breaks, a firing pin drops and the bomb explodes. That is my understanding of the mechanism. Those rusting, decomposing buried bombs are reaching an age where they could randomly explode at any moment and could even cause a chain reaction. It is best not to think too much about it. Story 34. Climate change will impact food security in the coming years. Increased precipitation and heat are already causing significant damage to crops. I believe we will see widespread famine within my lifetime. Story 35. Collapsing demographics. Our economic system is built around growing populations. As demographics decline, our entire modern system of exchange comes under stress and will need serious overhauls, which will only happen after the consequences are dire enough to necessitate them. Demographic collapse and deglobalization, the collapse of global trade, will be the root causes of many harms. Most people will only see the symptoms, not the cause. They will point to inflation, shortages of food, water, and other goods, and to rising conflicts. Ultimately, it all comes back to demographics, economics, geography, and trade. Every great empire in history believed it was unique. None were. We are not unique either. We have lived through the rise and now will witness the decline. Story 36. Melting ice caps at the South Pole could release pathogens previously unknown to humans. Story 37. Mark Zuckerberg and many other billionaires are building underground bunkers right now. Story 38. Many people think they already understand climate change, but it is still a grave threat. This is far more serious than anyone wants to admit. People are burying their heads in the sand because it is easier to pretend climate change is overblown than to acknowledge how dire our situation is. Story 39. Worldwide, the insect population has plummeted by more than 2% over the past 6 to 8 years and continues to decline. This is a serious concern. There has been a large increase in human antibiotic resistance. Story 40. Privatized healthcare will inevitably bankrupt the economy because markets for necessities with high barriers to entry have no limit on exploitation. Story 41. Diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. You feel fine until one day you suddenly do not. Story 42. I'm gonna mess with everyone and mention brain aneurysms here. Have one? You could die suddenly with no warning. Excess for eyes. It can happen even to the healthiest people. Story 43. Radon causes many cases of lung cancer, and most people do not know whether it is present in their homes. Story 44. I feel that the significant shift in mental health issues should be a clue of larger issues to come. Story 45. An electromagnetic pulse caused by solar flares could send us back to 1840s technology levels. We are overdue for a large solar eruption and are totally unprepared. Story 46. TikTok influencers are promoting mental illness like a trendy handbag. Dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is a major example. People are faking this ultra-rare disorder for internet clout and creating videos that say if you have done something, it means you have the disorder. There has been a large increase in self-diagnosis, with children and others reading about symptoms and faking them to feel special or to fit in. Story 47. Plastics are among the worst inventions. They are everywhere. In the oceans, on Mount Everest, in the foods we eat and the water we drink, and they are accumulating in our bodies at a rapid rate. Many wonder why cancer rates have increased, fertility rates have declined, and life expectancy has fallen. Plastics contain hormone-disrupting chemicals, and our bodies were not designed to accumulate them. We are poisoning ourselves. Deoxyribonucleic acid will mutate to adapt over thousands of years, but who knows the short-term impact over the next few hundred years. Story 48. Taken fairly literally, the 2038 problem is similar to the year 2000 problem but affects a different system of computer dates. Most computers have been counting time as the number of seconds since 1970 in a 32-bit integer. This counter will roll over in 2038. We averted the year 2000 problem, but computers have become more ubiquitous and uniform since then, so it remains to be seen how this will play out. Story 49. China faces multiple upcoming crises. An aging population below replacement level, a huge property bubble, a stagnating economy, and a government that appears to be planning for war. It also possesses nuclear weapons. Another concern is frozen viruses and bacteria in Siberia and Greenland that have been frozen for thousands of years and to which humans likely have no immunity. The ice that kept them trapped is melting. Story 50. Project 2025 is an attempt to overthrow the United States government and install a theocratic fascist regime. Story 51. The first global crop failure, which may not affect every region, could trigger a massive famine within the next 10 to 20 years unless the planet unites and begins serious, large-scale geoengineering and climate adaptation efforts. Developed countries will cope better because they have more wealth and infrastructure, but less developed countries such as India, with large populations and already dangerously hot climates, are particularly vulnerable and likely to be hit hard. One major cause of the Arab Spring in 2011 was a food shortage. Imagine that on a global scale. Modern crops are resilient, but a single extreme event, such as a severe heat dome combined with drought, can destroy the crops that feed millions. Learn how to grow potatoes. Story 52. Brain drain in the United States of America. Life is too expensive and unsatisfying for many young people. It is a big world, and your student loan debt is not an issue once you leave the United States of America. Your education and experience are valued in many other countries. Story 53. Municipal debt. The tax base in American cities cannot support aging infrastructure, so when it comes time to renew it, they finance the work with bonds, which consume more of an already small tax base. Eventually, the interest payments will swallow cities whole. Story 54. Basically, everything is on the verge of collapse within the next 100 years or so. Yet people would rather ignore it and carry on with life as normal than accept we are kind of fucked unless we really start to buckle down and focus on it. Story 55. The ships from World War II that were sunk remain on the seabed, many still containing thousands of liters of oil, fuel, chemicals, and explosives, slowly corroding and beginning to leak. It is terrifying that no one is doing anything about them. Story 56. Antibiotic resistance is increasing rapidly. Bacteria are evolving resistance to antibiotic drugs because of overuse and misuse. If we do not find a way to control this problem, which is essentially an attempt to outsmart evolution, we are rapidly heading back to the days when a minor cut or scrape could be fatal. Story 57. TikTok, Shorts and Reels are shortening children's attention spans and threaten to undermine an entire generation's ability to learn. Story 58. There is a supervolcano beneath Yellowstone National Park. If it erupts, it would be catastrophic for human civilization. Story 59. Insect populations are in free fall. It's pretty terrifying, to be honest. Story 60. The increasing acidification of the ocean is caused by higher carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. When blue-green algae begin to die off, oxygen levels will decrease. Consider what happens next. Story 61. I feel that coronavirus disease 2019 is an ecological issue and likely the first of many pandemics resulting from the destruction of ecosystems that previously kept these viruses contained. This 2012 article does not discuss coronavirus specifically, but warns that viruses spilling over from bats and other animals, as their habitats are destroyed, are a likely source of the next pandemic. Story 62. Global overpopulation. The population of Earth has doubled from 4 billion to 8 billion in the past 50 years. At this rate, we will reach 16 billion by 2074. Scientists estimate that Earth can sustain a population of 10 to 12 billion. Massive food and water shortages are much closer than people realize. Story 63. After reading this thread, I can only think of this meme. Story 64. The cost of healthcare. I work in a rural emergency room. 2 weeks ago, I had a 60-year-old patient who needed urgent abdominal surgery. He had heavy alcohol use and regularly used recreational drugs. He was admitted to the hospital, and as they were about to take him to surgery, he said he had a family emergency and left against medical advice. It turned out his grandson needed a ride to a friend's house. He returned 4 days later on a weekend night to the emergency department and said he was ready for surgery because his pain was worse. The surgeon said he could wait until Monday, but the patient did not show up. He returned on Thursday very sick, and we had to fly him by helicopter to a larger hospital because his condition had worsened. What should have been a $3,000 procedure covered by Medicaid turned into a more than $100,000 mess that will be covered by Medicaid because of his decisions. This happens much more often than people realize. Meanwhile, people without insurance who do not qualify for Medicaid but are doing everything right can go bankrupt after one traumatic event and a long hospital stay. Story 65. The economy, the environment, education, healthcare, housing, and criminal justice. I guess we are all pretty aware. Story 66. The staggering number of conspiracy theorists who confuse science with opinion. Story 67. I have heard that helium is limited and important for hospitals, yet we keep using it in balloons. Shouldn't we restrict that use? Story 68. Detention camps holding fighters from the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria are located in northern Syria under Kurdish control. After the group was defeated by Kurdish forces with involvement from the United States, Iran, and Russia, the Kurds established an administration in northern Syria that operates independently of the Syrian government. Many fighters were foreign nationals from countries such as Germany, the United States, and the United Kingdom and are now held in detention camps in the region. Children who were radicalized have been brought into these camps, and many continue to be radicalized within the detention system. No government wants to repatriate them, and the Kurdish administration lacks the resources to detain them indefinitely. If the detention camps fail or collapse, the Islamic State could re-emerge. Story 69. Looking at all these answers, humans have occupied this earth for tens to hundreds of thousands of years. How did this planet get wrecked beyond repair, with most of the damage occurring since World War II? Call it 75 years. Unbelievable. Story 70. Phosphorus is the basis of almost all commercial fertilizers. When it runs out, which could happen within 2 or 3 decades, may God have mercy on a planet with more than 8 billion people. Story 71. The average human body temperature is decreasing, and the temperature at which fungi can survive is increasing. This is essentially the opposite of The Last of Us. It scares me. Story 72. Well, I'm not sleeping tonight. These threads made me lose hope. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.